All right, Crim 4, let's go. Chapter 1, Introduction to the Justice System. So, ultimately, what this class is going to be about is we're going to go through basically from start to finish through the criminal justice system. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the history and the background of the criminal justice system. Slightly boring, but it'll get better. And then we're going to basically talk about citizens' rights, what police can and can't do, and then the court process basically from arraignment to appeal, and then some. So I really think the class is interesting. I hope you do too. I really like learning about the legal stuff. I think it's interesting. I think that I think you're going to like it. So hopefully. But we're talking most specifically, almost 99% of this class we're going to be talking about criminal justice system. So not necessarily about the civil side of the court system. So overview: understanding our concept of justice requires thoughtful comprehension of historical background, social values, moral standards, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Criminal courts are at the heart of the justice system. So criminal courts are where people will go when they are charged with a crime, right? Okay. So these are the three primary missions of the criminal courts: to administer justice in a fair and impartial manner, to protect the individual rights of the persons accused of crimes, and to provide an authority for controlling crime. So I want to go back to this one. What the heck does this mean? To administer justice in a fair and impartial manner. What is justice? Right? Okay, so I could ask all 50 of you that question and I could get 50 different answers. What is fair? What is impartial? We know what they should be. How do you think we, the criminal justice system in the United States, is doing with their primary missions? And I just thought in the United States there are a separate court system we typically refer to as a dual court system, that being the federal system and the state system. Federal courts typically involve federal matters. Yes, it is that easy. When I ask you a question like what kind of cases are typically heard in a federal court, the answer I'm looking for is federal cases. So what's the difference between the two? Can you think of a federal offense, a crime that you would be charged under the federal law as opposed to under state law? Well, there are a lot, but let's just start with something like trying to kill the president or a politician. If you shot the president in the state of California, if he was in the state of California and you shot him, that would be a federal offense. Now, if you shot me in the state of California, I'm not a federal official. I'm not the president. It would just be a state crime. So mail fraud, anything that has to do with U.S. mail typically is a federal offense. Crimes that take place across state lines, like human trafficking, drug trafficking, things like that. Bank robbery, and the reason for that is because the banking system is insured by the FDA. FDIC. They're insured by the federal government. I think the FDA is the food one. Sorry, Food and Drug Administration. No, that's not it. FDIC. So they are insured by the federal government. That's why bank robbery is a federal offense. So if I, go out and smash somebody's car in their driveway in the city of Fresno, I'm going to go to the state courts. If I go and smash up a mail truck, I'm going to be charged with a federal offense and go through federal court. When we say judicial opinions, we're talking about court decisions, basically. Judicial guidance, meaning what is the court, what kind of opinions and statutes have they imposed. Just like anywhere else, the courts have rules. If you've ever seen a copy of the California Penal Code book, it's probably 3 to 4 inches thick. Courts also have a book called Rules of Court. It is also about that thick. So there's tons of rules and regulations and standards and procedures that have to take place in the court system. This is an overview. So we're not gonna talk about it super in depth, and I'm also not an attorney. Let me back up. Why the heck am I teaching a class about court? I'll tell you why. Because while I was a probation officer, I was assigned as the probation officer representing the probation department in a courtroom, in the juvenile courtroom, for 8 years. So I was fortunate enough to get a lot of this kind of knowledge and information that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. So anyways, I'm not an attorney again, so don't think that I'm a lawyer and that I am not. So this is an overview. So what are the goals of the justice system? And I skipped that because it's kind of, I'm not crazy about the way this is all ordered. But law and order versus individual rights. So typically, the way we would see this, law and order tend to be the more conservative type people who say lock people up and throw away the key. As opposed to a person who is strong into individual rights, their main focus is going to be making sure the rights of the accused are protected. Now, you can imagine that there's a lot of pushback between those. Those are two very different concepts. Lock away and throw the key, and protect the suspect's rights. Typically, lock them up and throw the key, you're talking about a prosecutor. Individual rights, you're talking about a defense attorney. Okay. These are just some more goals of the court system: preventing crime, diverting offenders, deterring crime, controlling criminals, and rehabilitating offenders. There's a bunch more, so I'm going to keep going. Abstract goals: fairness. How do you think we're doing? Efficiency? Would you consider our court system efficient? Would you consider our court system effective? And back to it, what does that even mean? Okay, I know. This class frustrates me because of that. We're going to talk about the words justice and reasonableness. Those are the two things that are that stick out to me a lot in this class because they're so very difficult to define. The American Bar Association holds the standards above attorneys and judges. They're basically the ones who decide who can be a judge, who can't, all that kind of stuff. Where did our laws come from? Typically, basically, a lot of our laws are based on English common law. So when our founding fathers came over from England, they did a lot of things the same way that the English did. So that's typically how a lot of our laws were written. Although common law is called common law because it basically means it doesn't have to be written down in order for it to be a law. We do not have common law in the United States. We based our written laws on English common law. If it's not written in a legal book, it's not illegal. Okay? Our criminal procedure was also based on, oh, here we go, good, was also based on the laws of England. So I can remember when I was a kid, this phrase was used a lot of times. People would say, oh, this is my common law husband or my common law wife. And in England, my understanding is if you were living with someone or acting as a married couple for more than 7 years, then you were considered married under common law of England. Okay, that is not the case in the United States. If you are not married, you are not married. If you've been together for 50 years and you have, 10 kids and 200 grandkids, if you're not married, you're not married. Okay, so laws have to be written down, written set of regulations in order to be laws. The concept of justice is commonly used but seldom defined. Again, justice is one of those things, and I would say that it depends on who you are in the situation. What if your brother or sister or mom got drunk, started driving and hit and killed somebody? You, as the child of the offender, are going to have a different concept, an idea of what justice is, as opposed to the victim's family, right? So if someone breaks into your house and, I don't know, smashes up your Beats pill and your Xbox and all that other stuff, what is justice to you when that happens? It kind of depends on who you are, right? So anyways, what is right and wrong? What's right and wrong to me might be different than what's right and wrong to you. Most individuals associate the concept with fairness, equality, and goodness. Justice. Interesting one. Okay, rule of law refers to the concept that all individuals and institutions will abide by the laws and no one is above it. How are we doing with this one in our country? By choosing to become part of society, we agree to abide by society's rules and laws. So if you broke the law, and I use this example a lot because I think a lot of people don't know this, but let's say you are under 18 and you have sex with your under 18-year-old girlfriend. Let's say you're both 17. You didn't know that it was illegal to participate in a sex act if you were under 18. You didn't know. You just didn't know that. Does it matter? By choosing to become a part of this society, we agree to abide by the rules and laws. So you're responsible for knowing. So no, it really doesn't matter if you know or not. It's your responsibility as a person in our society to know that. Yeah, treason, felonies, and misdemeanors. Typically now, we used to have a lot of issues with treason early on in American society. But most of the offenses that are going before the courts now are either misdemeanors or felonies. Felonies, typically more serious offenses. You can end up in prison for a felony, but the incarceration time has to be more than a year. Fines are higher for those as well. Misdemeanors typically lower level offenses, and you can only serve time in jail for a misdemeanor up to a year. Some people would say that if it's a felony, it has to be violent. That's not true. There are a lot of felonies that are not violent. So don't get caught up on the whole violence issue, because there are some misdemeanors that are violent offenses, and some felonies that are not. So when you're trying to define these, because I may ask you, what's the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony? If you say a felony is a federal offense, I'm also going to say, no, not necessarily. Felonies are punishable by more than a year in custody. Typically, they're more serious offenses. Misdemeanors are lesser offenses, typically, and they are punishable by up to a year in jail. Okay. Historical development of the Bill of Rights. The Magna Carta is was the first one of the first written laws, sets of laws, not necessarily, it was not written in the United States, but the Declaration of Independence was, Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. First 10 amendments are known as the Bill of Rights. I'm probably going to ask you that. You probably already know this, but we're going to talk about them. Amendment 1, restrictions of the power, First Amendment rights, restriction on Congress. Amendment 2, right to bear arms. Amendment 3, billeting of soldiers, meaning people can't be forced to have soldiers living in their house during times of war. Amendment 4, my favorite, search and seizure. 5, I plead the fifth. You've heard that one before, right? You don't have to testify against yourself. 6th Amendment, it has to do with due process, sorry. 7th, trial by jury, and all these are in your book. 8th, involuntary servitude, and 8th Amendment, you think about cruel and unusual punishment. 9th, certain rights not denied to the people, and 10th, state rights. Okay, so what we're going to do is talk about a couple of these. We're definitely going to talk about this one during this class. We're definitely going to talk about this one, and we're going to talk about this one. So 4, 5, and 8 are the ones that we are going to focus on in this class. 14th Amendment was adopted in 1868. That basically meant that all of these rights were not only valid for federal laws, this was also valid for state laws. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Again, we talked about the courts being, we have a dual court system, and that's basically considered state and federal. Jurisdiction is the ability of the court to enforce laws and to punish individuals who violate those laws. So when you're talking about jurisdiction, we're talking about which court has power or authority over which matter. So let's just say this. Let's say I decided to get divorced. What kind of court would I go to? What court has jurisdiction over divorce proceedings? We're talking probably a family court, right? Would I go to a criminal court in Fresno because of a divorce? No, because a criminal court wouldn't have jurisdiction over a divorce. A family court would. Make sense? Same concept with federal versus state crimes. If I, smashed up somebody's car who did not work for the federal government in their front yard, would I go to federal court for that? No, federal court doesn't have jurisdiction over that because it's not a federal matter. So we're really just talking about which court has jurisdiction over which matter. I already talked about dual courts. Court structures, this is tough. If you work in a court, the judge is the boss. What if you have an issue with the judge? Yeah, it's a tough one because there's little or no supervision. Specialization occurs at the local levels, so they have smaller courts, typically at the local levels, that deal with particular issues, like drug courts, things like that. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this is how the court system's set up. I get arrested for, let's say, No. Let's say I get arrested for stealing a car. It's a felony. It happens to be a felony vehicle theft. And I go to trial, and I get convicted. But while I was on trial, the judge fell asleep. So I don't think what happened in that trial was fair. I want to appeal it. I want a higher court to look at my case. Ooh, that's not what I meant to do. To look at my case. That would be an appellate court. If the appellate court still doesn't agree with me and I still want a higher court to look at it, I go up to the state Supreme Court. So these are just levels of courts. The federal courts are set up the same way. You have a circuit court, an appellate court, and the U.S. Supreme Court. So the highest court in the land is, if you put Supreme Court on a quiz, you're going to get it wrong because I want you to say it's the United States Supreme Court because each state also has a Supreme Court. I know, it's getting a little complicated, but we'll work it all out, I promise. Federal courts, blah, 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 blah. U.S. Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. How does a case make its way to the United States Supreme Court? It has to deal with an issue of a person's constitutional rights being violated. So think about, I remember this case that went through not too long ago where it was a gay couple who wanted to get married, who were getting married, and they went to a certain bakery to have their cake made. And the baker who owned the bakery said, I don't believe in gay marriage, so therefore I am not going to make your cake. Okay. So they sued him. It went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. So it went through it went through state appellate courts and made its way all the way up to the United States Supreme Court because he's saying that his rights were being violated because he was being discriminated against for being gay. Okay? So that's how it has to be a case where there's someone's rights being violated are an issue. And even at that, the United States Supreme Court doesn't have to take the case. So you ask, what happened during that case? I'll tell you, it was interesting. Not interesting. Yeah, it was interesting. So he made his way all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that because it was a privately owned business and it wasn't a government business or anything like that, that he didn't have to make the cake. He didn't have to do anything that was against his own belief system, whatever that, anyways. So interesting. The court found that too bad. If you own your own business and it was not a public entity, it was not. He was allowed to decline. Venue. A lot of people get venue and jurisdiction confused. Venue is much more basic concept. Venue is just the location, geographic location where the case should be heard. If I smash someone's car window out in Fresno, I'm going to go to court in Fresno. I'm not going to go to court in Santa Barbara, right? Because Santa Barbara doesn't have, the venue is incorrect. It's not the right jurisdiction. It's not the right location. So let me talk about a change of venue. For example, in 2016, it was September of 2016, there was a case a crime that occurred here in Fresno. It happened at the Fresno County Jail where 2 correctional officers were shot. And the guy was arrested who shot the correctional officers. And the news media was everywhere. There were reports on the news every single day about the crime and about the defendant and about the victims and all that kind of stuff. So in that case, I'm just using him as an example, he may have felt that he couldn't get a fair trial in Fresno because everybody knew so much about the case already. He may have asked for a change of venue, meaning I want to go to another county that's not as familiar with my case so that I can get a fair trial. But it's just a geographic location. Make sense? I hope it does. Again, jurisdiction, which court has power over the matter. Attorney generals, the district attorneys, these are your prosecutors. Typically you have one that's the head of all these who is elected as the district attorney. Fresno County's district attorney is Lisa Smitkamp. You've probably heard of her before. Most cases that they are the public prosecutor. Excuse me. So concept of justice, get ready for that on a discussion question upcoming. Criminal courts are the heart of the system. There are 2 separate court systems, the dual court system, like I said, state and federal, and that's it. Ooh, that was kind of long, sorry.